Hello everyone, I'm Rachel, the Messy Minimalist. Welcome back to my channel. I always have excuses as to why it's been a little while since I posted, but it's been a little while since I posted. My pup got sick, and then I got sick, and it was just kind of some nasty business for a while, and it took me a little while to get better, but I'm feeling good now, and I just feel like it's time. It's time for another video. Today's video is all about our fantasy self. You guys probably know by now, but I try to do as much original content as I can. I try not to just hijack other people's ideas, but I did get a video request about a week ago that came in on my blog from a gal named Yuli. So if you're watching, Yuli, hello. And it was a very sweet request the way she worded it. She had seen a video originally by Allison Anderson, and that's not somebody that I had heard of, but I guess she is a pretty big YouTuber. So Yuli's request was that I go check out this video done by Allison Anderson and to do my own version of it. Of course, my first thought was like, probably not, sorry. But I went ahead and I checked out the video, and I'm going to link to her video in my description because it is only fair. But the video was basically all about decluttering your fantasy self. And while Allison didn't declutter anything in the video, she did do a really good explanation about what a fantasy self is. And I thought that was super interesting. So, Yuli, I'm going to do a video today, per your request, about decluttering my fantasy self. But I'm actually going to go and show you guys some legit decluttering. I'm going to get rid of the stuff that's just the fantasy me. Donate them, trash them, whatever it takes. Let me first just kind of explain a little bit of my understanding of your fantasy self. A fantasy self is very similar to when I talk about like the what if self, or like your crafty version of yourself, whatever it is. I always hold on to items and I call them my what if items, because I'm always thinking like, well, what if I one day feel like, fixing all of these things, or if I one day feel like making my own whatever. I don't even know. There's always the, well, what if one day I do this? And really, that's probably our fantasy self. That's the, well, one day when I'm a totally different person, maybe I'll actually use some of this stuff. The best example is probably just a real life example, and we can use me. Yeah. It's so sad, actually, to shine a spotlight on your fantasy you. I know I'm about to say goodbye to that person in some way. And it's not to say that you can't still aspire to be somebody a little bit better or different, but I'm just going to be real here. What are some of the things that I have that are like cluttering up my house because I imagine myself as using them? The first kind of category of my fantasy self is that fantasy Rachel is a really sharp dresser. Pretty sharp, business sharp. I have quite a few clothes in my closet that I still keep around that even despite my KonMari inspired decluttering sessions, I keep those clothes, and the reason that I keep them is because Fantasy Rachel is gonna wear them someday, and Fantasy Rachel has lots of really important business meetings to go to and important like business dinner outings. I don't really even know. There's a lot of the stuff in my closet that I'm going to show you. I'm going to try on a bunch of different outfits. You're going to see me. It'll be my last hurrah trying on these different outfits that are just Fantasy Rachel, and they're not the real Rachel. So I will show you guys some of those in just a few minutes here. Fantasy Rachel is a really awesome gardener. Real Rachel's a pretty good gardener, but Fantasy Rachel has like so many gardens, and they're all really beautiful. And there's lots of pathways through them and all kinds of cool like hidden treasures in them. You just never know, you're gonna look through some bushes and stuff and see some cute little thing. That's Fantasy Rachel. I don't actually have that many gardens. I have a few gardens, and they're nice, lovely gardens, but I don't have just like gardens everywhere you look. And so I still have an abundance of outdoor gardeny stuff that I'm just never really going to use. I just know I'm not. I got rid of a bunch of that stuff in my shed clean out. There's still a lot that I kept that's really, it's just sitting there. I haven't done a recap video because I'm too embarrassed to say that I couldn't make myself go back through one final round and like really look at the last stuff I had there. So I just left it sitting outside the shed. But I'm going to show that stuff to you again, finally, because Fantasy Rachel was going to go do some immaculate cool gardenscape. But real Rachel isn't. Real Rachel is really probably never gonna do that, because real Rachel understands that there's like this much time in the day to do anything else, and I just don't have time for it. So garden stuff, that is fantasy land. So I was thinking about hobbies a little bit, because I feel like that's one of the things that people can kind of collect a lot of clutter around, is their hobbies. And seasonal items, can be a big one for people. Crafting, like scrapbook stuff, really crafty stuff in general. But I think hobbies. So I don't actually have all that many hobbies, which is kind of silly. I look back and I'm like, what do I even do? There are a few hobbies that I had really tried to get into, and the fantasy side of me said that like I was an active hobbyist in, knitting. And so if my dear sister-in-law who bought me the best knitting set ever is watching this, I want you to know that I gave it my all, because I really, really thought that I wanted to knit. I asked specifically for Christmas last year to get this really nice like knitting kit, because I was like, I'm gonna get into knitting, I'm gonna do this. And I did start it, and I knitted like some kind of long thing. Well, it was like this big, and then I just eventually threw it away. And there's like knitting needles all over the house now. I mean, I just never got into it, and I realized that I don't actually have any kind of interest in it. I thought I did, but I don't. So it's not that big of a deal. I'm just willing to accept that fantasy Rachel, she can knit up a storm, but real Rachel doesn't. So real Rachel's gonna go get rid of all that knitting stuff. The next one on my list is that fantasy Rachel is super organized. Super organized. Fantasy Rachel has a calendar downstairs. It's like 6 foot by 5 foot or something. It's huge. It's a huge calendar that sits on our wall in our mudroom. And the dates on the calendar are January and February of 2017, because that's when we put the calendar on the wall and we're like, whoa, we're going to be really organized this year. And so January and February went up on the calendar, and it's been there ever since. I feel like it's safe to say that Fantasy Rachel is organized, and Fantasy Rachel does keep a really cool calendar. But real Rachel does not, and real Rachel is going to do something else with that wall space, so the calendar is going to come down. Next one is, this one's kind of an interesting one, because I didn't actually purchase these items that I'm about to talk about, but I feel like this might be a common one though, so bear with me here. Fantasy Rachel is an awesome entertainer. She entertains huge parties with lots of people, big picnics, big gatherings. Everyone's having fun. There's a lot of good buffet style stuff going on, and Fantasy Rachel's really good at that. Like I said, I didn't actually buy them myself. They were something that I inherited from my mom. So granted, I wasn't completely out of line in having them, but I was just thinking that I was different than I am. Turns out I've actually never used them. So I realized that, well, that's clearly just a fantasy. So I'm going to go and walk through all those categories that I just mentioned. Specifically, we're going to start in my closet, and I'm going to show you guys a couple outfits that were Fantasy Rachel outfits. And we'll see if I can just say goodbye to Fantasy Rachel once and for all. My lovely knitting kit. Ooh. It's all kind of out of order because the most action that this has gotten has been my 2.5-year-old rearranging them all. This was something that I thought that I wanted. I really thought I was going to get into it. turns out I didn't even get to open this stuff because I couldn't get past like the very basic knit. Like I said, I only got like this much done, and then it just, I don't even know. It's just not for me. It's fantasy me, not real me. Lovely knitting kit getting donated. That table and all the stuff around it is everything that I am getting rid of. It's basically the remains of what I couldn't put out this summer when I did my garden shed clean out. I did the best I could. That stuff sat there all summer. I guess that means I did not need it very much, and it is just a part of my fantasy self that will never come to fruition. So that stuff is all going to get donated. I will see if a couple people want to pick through it, and then I'm just going to go ahead and bring it to the donate center. So behind me we have all of the serving stuff, I guess you'd call it. I have no shame in getting rid of this. It is very clearly Fantasy Rachel who thought that she was ever going to entertain. I just know I'm not going to. Not in this kind of capacity anyway. So I'm going to get rid of this stuff, and I feel like I've just regained a little bit more shelf space in the garage, and you know, that feels pretty good. Okay, thank you guys for watching. I hope that you had fun watching me declutter and say goodbye to my fantasy self. You know, I don't feel so bad about saying bye to her. I really almost feel like all along you kind of know that that's not really you, despite holding on to that stuff and genuinely feeling like, no, this does spark joy, or I am gonna use this one day. I think deep down, when you kind of frame it as your real self and your fantasy self, it's not so hard to say goodbye to some of that stuff that you know is just, it's just not you. You gave it your all, it didn't work out, it's not a big deal. So anyway, let me know what kind of stuff you guys feel like is holding up your decluttering process, because it's the fantasy you and not the real you. And if you haven't gone through this exercise yourself, I highly recommend it. Like I said, thanks to Allison Anderson for putting out the idea of your fantasy self. It was a good idea, and I hope that you guys liked my rendition of it as well. So if you guys want to catch up with me anytime between my videos, you can always catch me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter a little bit. I'm really still pretty bad at Twitter, so I'm there, but I don't do that much on it. But I'm around. The last thing that I want to do is thank all of my patrons. This month has been a really great one for people who've checked out my Patreon page, contributed to that, and just interacted on it. So that has been really fun, and big thanks to all of you guys. You are awesome. I will try to be a little bit more active on my blog this month as well, so if you want to chat with me there, you can. Okay, that's it. I'll talk to you guys later.